Fluorescent lights buzz like wasps above Jake. Just try it one more time, he begs the cashier, his daughter's formula clutched in his hand. The card declines again. Shame burns hotter than the leather on his back. Across the store, Marcus, unseen, already knows the price of judgment and the quiet power of 8 crumpled dollars. Was recording, and that when 300 motorcycles roared into town, that single act of kindness would give him back the honor he thought was gone forever. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting harsh shadows across the cracked linoleum floor of Murphy's Corner store. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that felt like it would never end, and the automatic doors had been sighing open and shut all night, letting in bursts of cold October air that made everyone pull their jackets tighter. Marcus Washington stood near the magazine rack, his weathered hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee he'd been nursing for the past hour. At 55, he moved through the world like a ghost, quiet, careful not to take up too much space. His clothes hung loose on his thin frame, clean but worn soft from too many washings at the laundromat down the street. No one looked at him directly. They never did. But Marcus was watching. He was always watching. Near the checkout counter, a mountain of a man in a black leather vest was getting loud. Jake Miller had the kind of presence that made cashiers nervous and mothers pull their children closer. Hell's Angels patch stretched across his broad back, faded from years of highway wind and rain. His basket sat heavy on the counter. Bread, milk, canned soup, baby formula. Groceries for tomorrow's breakfast, not the makings of trouble. Come on, man. Just try it one more time, Jake pleaded with Sarah Chen, the 20-something cashier whose name tag sat crooked on her green polo shirt. The card reader kept flashing red, beeping its rejection like an accusation. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she swiped the card again. Beep. Red light. I'm sorry, sir, but it's still declining. Do you have another form of payment? Jake's jaw tightened. He dug through his wallet, pulling out crumpled bills and loose change, counting under his breath. $12.50, 15. Damn. His voice cracked just a little. I'm short $8. Behind him, the line was getting restless. A woman in scrubs clutched her purse tighter. An elderly man muttered something about those people just loud enough to carry. Near the frozen foods, someone whispered the word that always came first. Stealing. The whisper spread like spilled oil. He's probably stealing. Look at him. Call security. Marcus had heard those same whispers before. He knew exactly how they burned. Sarah glanced toward the back office where her manager was counting register receipts. Her finger hovered over the panic button hidden beneath the counter. I need to call my manager. No, please, Jake said. And for a second, the tough biker facade cracked completely. Look, I'll put something back. The formula. Keep the formula. My daughter needs it. That's when Marcus stepped forward. 20 years ago, Marcus Washington had owned the finest hardware store in 3 counties. Washington Hardware sat on the corner of Maple and Fifth, a squat brick building that smelled like sawdust and possibility. Neighbors came for nails and paint, but they stayed for Marcus's easy laugh and the way he'd wave off payment when times were tough. Get it to me when you can, he'd say. And somehow people always did. Marcus had built more than a business. He built trust. When Mrs. Foster's porch steps rotted through one winter, Marcus showed up with lumber and his tools, refusing payment until she cornered him with a homemade apple pie. When the Hendersons' boy broke their basement window with a baseball, Marcus cut them a deal on glass and installed it himself because accidents happen to good kids. The store had been his father's dream, passed down like a sacred trust. Marcus expanded it, added a small rental section for power tools, hired 2 part-time employees from the neighborhood. His wife, Linda, kept the books, and their 8-year-old son, Tommy, would sit behind the counter after school pretending to run the register. Then came the shipment that changed everything. It was supposed to be routine, a delivery of high-end power tools from a distributor in Chicago. Marcus signed the delivery receipt, helped the driver unload 12 boxes of cordless drills, circular saws, and sanders. Premium stuff that would sell well to the contractors who trusted Washington Hardware. By the next morning, half the boxes were gone. No broken locks, no shattered windows, no signs of forced entry, just empty shelves where thousands of dollars worth of inventory should have been sitting. The police filed a report. The insurance adjuster asked questions Marcus couldn't answer. And then came the whispers. Must have been an inside job. Who else had keys? Bet he's got gambling debts. Probably sold them himself and claimed theft. The whispers grew into rumors. Rumors became truth in the coffee shops and church pews where reputations lived and died. Within a month, his regular customers started shopping at Home Depot. The bank froze his line of credit. Vendors demanded cash up front. Marcus fought back at first. He hired a lawyer he couldn't afford, offered a reward for information, even installed security cameras. But you can't fight gossip with facts, and you can't prove innocence to people who've already made up their minds. 6 months later, Washington Hardware went dark. A year after that, Linda packed her bags and took Tommy to her sister's house in Ohio. She kissed Marcus goodbye at the front door of their foreclosed home, tears streaming down her face. "I still believe you," she whispered, "but I can't watch you disappear anymore." Marcus had been disappearing ever since. 3 years on the streets had taught him to stay invisible, to move through the world without making waves. He slept behind Murphy's Corner store most nights on cardboard that stayed dry when the rain wasn't too heavy. The owner, Tom Bradley, pretended not to see him there. Now, watching Jake Miller's shoulders hunch with shame, Marcus saw himself 10 years younger, standing in his own store, while whispers cut him down to nothing. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 8 crumpled dollar bills, every cent he had left from the aluminum cans he'd collected that week. They were damp from the rain that had soaked through his jacket, soft as tissue paper from being folded and unfolded too many times. Without a word, Marcus walked to the counter and placed the bills next to Jake's basket. "I've got it," he said quietly. The store went silent, except for the buzz of fluorescent lights and the hum of the refrigerated cases. Jake stared at the money, then at Marcus, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "No, man, I can't. You can." Marcus's voice was steady, weathered by years of speaking to empty rooms. "Take it." Sarah's eyes darted between the two men, unsure of the protocol for kindness. Behind them, the line had stopped shuffling. Everyone was watching now. Jake tried to push the money back. "You don't understand. I'll pay you back, but don't need you to." Marcus turned to face the crowd of onlookers, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. He lifted his chin, the way he used to when he gave estimates to contractors when his word meant something in this town. "You look at him and see trouble because of the leather," Marcus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the store. "You look at me and see worthless because I don't have a home. But how many of you would empty your pockets for a stranger?" The silence stretched like a held breath. "How many of you cross the street when you see me coming? How many times do you push people down just so you can feel like you're standing taller?" A woman near the bread aisle looked at her shoes. The elderly man stopped muttering. Even the music seemed to quiet down as if the building itself was listening. Marcus picked up Jake's basket and handed it to Sarah. "Ring him up outside." The October air bit at their faces as automatic doors wheezed shut behind them. Jake caught up to Marcus in the parking lot, clutching the plastic bag of groceries like a lifeline. "Why?" Jake's voice was rough around the edges, thick with something he hadn't felt in years. "You don't even know me." Marcus stopped walking under the yellow streetlight. His face looked tired but peaceful because somebody should have done the same for me once. Jake shifted the bag to his other hand, leather jacket creaking in the silence. He wanted to say more, wanted to explain that he wasn't what people thought, that the patch on his back used to mean something better than fear, but the words felt too small for the moment. "Name's Jake," he said instead. "Marcus." They stood there for a minute. Two men who understood what it meant to be judged by their covers. Then Jake reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card, worn soft at the edges. "Miller's Auto Repair," he said. "It's not much, but if you ever need anything." Marcus took the card, feeling its weight. "Thank you." Jake climbed onto his bike, a battered Harley that had seen better decades. As he kicked it to life, the engine coughed and rumbled like an old dog finding its voice. "Marcus," Jake called over the engine noise. That thing you said back there about somebody should have done the same for you. What happened? Marcus folded the business card carefully and slipped it into his coat pocket, right next to the empty space where $8 used to be. Long story, he said. Maybe I'll tell you sometime. As Jake's tow lights disappeared into the night, Marcus didn't see the teenager in the back seat of a parked car. Cell phone pressed against the window, finger hitting stop recording on a video that would change everything. Emma Rodriguez was 17 years old and had more followers on TikTok than her high school had students. She'd been waiting for her mom to finish her night shift at the hospital when she witnessed the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. A homeless man giving his last $8 to a biker everyone was afraid of. Her hands shook as she edited the video, adding simple text overlay. Homeless man uses his last of $8 to pay for stranger's groceries after store accuses him of stealing. She posted it at 12:23 a.m. and went to bed. By dawn, the video had 10,000 views. By lunch, it was trending. By dinner, it had crossed into the millions, shared across every platform, where stories of human kindness fought for space against the daily dose of rage. The comments section was a battlefield. Fake staged homeless guy probably stole that money. But for every cruel word, 10 more poured in with a different message. This made me cry. Faith in humanity restored. I knew a man like this once. My father was Marcus. My brother was Jake, 3 states away. In a clubhouse that smelled like motor oil and brotherhood, Big Mike Morrison was scrolling through his phone when the video stopped him cold. At 300, with arms like tree trunks, Big Mike had been the president of the Midwest Hells Angels for 15 years. He'd seen every kind of story about bikers, most of them lies designed to sell newspapers or justify fear. But this was different. This was one of his own. Jake Miller from the Detroit chapter, standing humiliated in a grocery store, while a homeless man with nothing gave him everything. Big Mike called an emergency meeting. 50 leather-clad men filled the clubhouse within an hour. Bikes lined up outside like a metallic army. They watched the video in silence, some shaking their heads, others wiping their eyes when they thought no one was looking. This is about respect, Big Mike announced when the video ended. This man, this Marcus Washington, he stood up for Jake when nobody else would. He saw past the patch to the man underneath. Nods around the room. These men knew what it meant to be judged by colors and leather, to have people cross streets and clutch purses when they walked by. Jake says the man's homeless, living behind some store in Detroit, says he lost his business years ago to rumors and lies. Big Mike's voice carried the weight of command. Brothers, what do we do when someone shows respect to our family? We show respect back, came the unified response. That's right. And I'm thinking this Marcus Washington deserves more than respect. I'm thinking he deserves the biggest goddamn thank you we can give him. The room erupted in agreement. Phones came out. Calls were made. Within 6 hours, Hells Angels chapters from Chicago, Indianapolis, Milwaukee, and Cincinnati had confirmed what Big Mike already knew. 300 riders would roll into Detroit at dawn. Operation Second Chance was born. Marcus woke up on his cardboard bed behind Murphy's Corner store to the sound of distant thunder. Except the sky was clear, and thunder didn't usually have a rhythm like heartbeats. He sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and listened. The rumble was getting closer, growing from a whisper to a growl to something that made the windows rattle in their frames. By the time he stood up, brushing crumbs of corrugated cardboard from his jacket, the sound was unmistakable. Motorcycles, a lot of them. The first bike rounded the corner at 700 a.m., sharp chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Then another, then 10 more, then 50. They kept coming until the street looked like a river of leather and steel. Engines rumbling in harmony like some kind of mechanical symphony. People poured out of houses and shops drawn by the noise and the spectacle. Mothers grabbed children. Store owners peered through windows, and somewhere in the distance, police sirens began to wail. But the bikes weren't stopping for trouble. They were stopping for Marcus. Jake Miller pulled up first, dismounting with a grin wider than the handlebars. Morning, brother. Hope you don't mind company. Behind him, 300 Hells Angels sat astride, their machines patches from dozens of chapters, creating a patchwork of brotherhood. They'd ridden through the night from 7 different states, united by a video and a simple truth. When someone shows love to your family, you show love back. Big Mike Morrison stepped forward, his presence commanding even among this crowd of hard men. Marcus Washington. Marcus nodded, still trying to process the scene in front of him. 300 bikers had come to his alley behind a convenience store. It felt like a dream, or maybe a very elaborate mistake. Son, my name's Mike Morrison, and these are my brothers. We saw what you did for Jake here, and we've got something to say about it. Mike's voice carried across the parking lot, silencing even the rumble of idling engines. What you did in that store, standing up for a man when everyone else was ready to tear him down. That's not just kindness, brother. That's courage. That's what family does for family. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I just paid for groceries. No, you didn't. Jake stepped up beside Mike, pulling a folded piece of paper from his vest pocket. You paid for groceries with your last $8. You stood between me and a lynch mob. You gave me dignity when the world wanted to take it away. He unfolded the paper, a hand-drawn blueprint of a small building. Simple lines sketched in ballpoint pen showed walls, a roof, windows, and a front door wide enough for Hope to walk through. We found out what happened to you, Marcus. Your hardware store belies. The way this town threw you away like garbage. Jake's voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. We can't give you back the years they stole, but we can give you this. Marcus stared at the blueprint, recognition dawning slowly. It was his store. Not exactly the same, but close enough to make his heart skip. The lot where your place used to be. It's still empty, still for sale. As of 1 hour ago, it belongs to you again. Mike held up a deed, official and notarized, 300 signatures on the loan papers. Brother, we all own a piece of your dream now. The crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle began to murmur. Marcus Washington, the homeless man they'd ignored for 3 years, was suddenly the center of the biggest story their town had seen in decades. I can't accept this, Marcus whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. You can't refuse it either, Jake replied. Because it's not charity, brother. It's justice. And we're not just giving you a building. We're giving you back your name. By 8 a.m., the construction had begun. The bikers worked like a machine, each man knowing his role without needing instruction. Some cleared debris from the lot where Washington Hardware used to stand. Others unloaded lumber and tools from trucks that seemed to materialize from nowhere. A group of younger members mixed concrete while veterans measured and marked foundations. Marcus stood in the middle of it all, overwhelmed and slightly dizzy. Jake handed him a tool belt, worn leather soft from years of honest work. You're not watching this happen, brother. You're making it happen with us. For the first time in 3 years, Marcus Washington picked up a hammer with purpose. The work progressed with impossible speed. Foundations poured, walls framed, electrical run through studs that still smelled like the forest they came from. The bikers worked in shifts, some heading home to jobs and families, others riding in to take their place. The convoy was constant, leather and chrome flowing in and out like a tide of brotherhood. As the sun climbed higher, something else began to change. The neighbors who had watched from a distance started moving closer. Mrs. Helen Foster, the elderly woman who lived across the street, approached cautiously with a pitcher of iced tea. For the workers, she said quietly, not quite meeting Marcus's eyes. Sarah Chen from the corner store arrived with her mother carrying boxes of sandwiches from Murphy's. She said, Tom said to tell you it's on the house. By noon, the entire community had been drawn into the orbit of something bigger than themselves. Children sat on curbs, wide-eyed at the spectacle of so many motorcycles and so much purposeful activity. Teenagers took selfies with bikers who looked nothing like the monsters their parents had warned them about. And through it all, Marcus worked, swinging hammers, lifting beams, measuring twice and cutting once, like his father had taught him 40 years ago. His hands remembered the weight of tools, the satisfaction of building something that would last. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd of onlookers grew bolder. People approached with offerings, cold drinks, homemade cookies, folding chairs for the older bikers. But more than that, they came with words. Sarah Chen was first. She found Marcus during a water break, her hands twisting nervously around the hem of her Murphy's corner store polo shirt. Mr. Washington, I wanted to apologize for the other night for not standing up when people were saying things about Mr. Miller, for not standing up for you either. Marcus sat down his water bottle and looked at her. Really looked. She was maybe 22, working nights to pay for community college, probably making $8 an hour to deal with every kind of person the city could throw at her. You were doing your job, he said. Nothing to apologize for. No, there is. Her voice cracked slightly. I've seen you behind the store sometimes when I take out the trash. I never said hello. I never asked if you needed anything. I just walked past like you weren't there. Marcus's throat tightened. How many people had walked past him in 3 years? How many had looked through him like he was invisible? I'm saying hello now, Sarah continued, and I'm asking, is there anything you need? Before Marcus could answer, she was joined by others. Tom Bradley, the store manager who had threatened to call the police that night, stood awkwardly holding a manila envelope. This is for you, he said, thrusting the envelope forward. Security deposit, first month's rent paid in full. You want to sell hardware again? There's space in my store. Small section, but it's yours if you want it. Dr. James Patterson, who used to buy supplies for his weekend carpentry projects, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. Marcus, I owe you an apology that's 10 years overdue. I believe the talk about you. I shopped somewhere else because I thought you might be dishonest. I was wrong. One by one they came. Neighbors who had crossed streets to avoid him, former customers who had abandoned his store based on whispers, people who had seen him sleeping behind buildings and walking past like he was part of the scenery. Each apology hit Marcus like a physical blow. Not because they hurt, but because they healed something he thought was broken beyond repair, his faith in the possibility of second chances. Mrs. Foster was last. The 80-year-old woman who used to buy flower seeds from his garden section approached slowly, leaning heavily on a walker decorated with tennis balls. Marcus Washington, she said, her voice sharp as autumn air. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation. The construction noise seemed to fade as she spoke, 200 workers pausing to listen without quite realizing why. That night your tools went missing. I saw someone in your parking lot. Young man, maybe 20, loading boxes into a pickup truck. I thought it was you working late. Never occurred to me it might be theft until after the rumors started. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. Mrs. Foster, I should have said something then. Should have gone to the police. Told them what I saw, but I was scared of getting involved. Scared of being wrong. She reached into her purse and pulled out a faded photograph. Found this in my late husband's things last month. Thought you should see it. The photograph showed the front of Washington Hardware on opening day, 25 years ago. Marcus's father stood proudly beside a young Marcus, both men grinning at the camera. Above them, the sign read, Washington Hardware. Honest work, fair prices, good neighbors. Your daddy would be proud, Mrs. Foster whispered, and I should have said that a long time ago. By sunset, the frame of the new Washington Hardware stood complete. It wasn't large, maybe half the size of the original store, but it was solid, square, and true. The roof would go on tomorrow, then the siding, then the electrical and plumbing, but the real construction had already finished. Somewhere between the first apology and the last nail-driven home, Marcus Washington had been rebuilt too. As the bikers began to load their tools and prepare for the night, Jake found Marcus sitting on the front steps of his new store, staring at the blueprint that had become reality in the space of one impossible day. How you feeling, brother? Marcus looked up at the man whose groceries had started everything. Like I might be dreaming. You're not. Jake sat down beside him, leather vest creaking. But even if you were, 300 of us are having the same dream. That makes it real enough. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky orange and pink. Around them, bikers broke down workstations and fired up engines, preparing for the long rides home to 7 different states. Big Mike Morrison approached, carrying something wrapped in black leather. Before we go, got one more thing for you. He unwrapped a Hell's Angels vest, black leather worn soft with age, but instead of the usual club patches, this one bore something different. Honorary Brotherhood across the top and underneath, in careful white stitching, a single-word family. You stood up for one of ours when the world wanted to tear him down, Mike said, holding the vest out like an offering. That makes you one of ours forever. Marcus stood slowly and slipped his arms through the vest. It fit perfectly, settling across his shoulders like a promise. For the first time in 3 years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Speech. Someone called out from the crowd, and soon 300 voices were chanting, "Speech, speech, speech." Marcus had never been comfortable with attention, but as he looked out at the sea of leather and chrome, at the neighbors who had gathered to watch, at the store that had risen from ashes in a single day, he found his voice. "I don't know what to say to people who give everything to a stranger," he began, his words carrying across the lot. 3 days ago, I was nobody, a man you walk past without seeing. Today, I'm surrounded by brothers I never knew I had. He gestured toward the frame of his new store. This isn't just a building. It's proof that kindness isn't dead. That brotherhood is real. That sometimes the best thing you can do is stand up when everyone else is ready to knock someone down. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. I spent $8 on groceries for Jake because someone should have done the same for me once. What you've given me today, this is someone finally doing the same for me. And I promise you, as long as I draw a breath, I'll do the same for the next person who needs it. The cheer that went up could be heard 3 blocks away. Engines roared to life, a mechanical symphony of brotherhood and joy. As the convoy began to move out, each bike pausing to acknowledge Marcus with a wave or a nod. The man who had been invisible for 3 years stood in the center of everything finally seen. 6 months later, Washington Hardware hummed with the kind of activity that had been missing for a decade. The shelves were full, the register was busy, and the small bell above the door chimed constantly with customers who came for nails and stayed for conversation. Marcus stood behind the counter wearing his Hell's Angels vest over a clean work shirt, helping Mrs. Chen pick out the right screws for her kitchen cabinet repair. At a workbench in the back, he was rebuilding a lawnmower engine for Dr. Patterson, the same man who had abandoned his store years ago based on gossip. The front door chimed, and Tommy Chen, Sarah's 10-year-old nephew, wheeled in a bicycle with a chain that had jumped its gears. It was the kind of simple repair that took 5 minutes and cost nothing. The kind of service that built communities one small favor at a time. "Mr. Marcus, can you fix it?" Tommy asked, his face bright with the confidence of a child who had never learned to doubt that adults would help him. "Let's take a look," Marcus said, coming around the counter with the easy smile of a man who had remembered how to belong in the world. As he knelt beside the bike, adjusting the chain with practiced hands, the rumble of a familiar engine drifted through the open door. Jake Miller pulled up to the curb, his weekly visit as regular as sunrise. He'd made a habit of stopping by every Saturday, sometimes needing supplies for his auto shop, sometimes just needing coffee and conversation with the brother who had saved more than his groceries that night. "Fixed," Marcus announced, spinning the bike's pedals to test the chain. "Good as new." Tommy beamed and pedaled out into the afternoon, calling, "Thank you," over his shoulder. Through the window, Marcus watched him ride past a group of teenagers who stepped aside respectfully. Not because they feared the boy, but because they respected the man who had fixed his bike. Jake walked in, pulling off his gloves and looking around the store with satisfaction. The inventory was fuller now, the displays more organized, the whole place humming with the energy of a business that mattered to its community. "Looks good in here," Jake said, accepting the cup of coffee Marcus had poured without being asked. "Feels good too." Marcus leaned against the counter, watching the afternoon traffic through windows that stayed clean now in a store that stayed busy. "Sometimes I still can't believe it's real." "It's real because you made it real," Jake replied. "That night in the store, you had a choice. You could have stayed invisible. Let me take whatever was coming. But you stepped up. You stood between me and a mob, and you did it with your last $8. Marcus shrugged. The way he always did when people tried to make him into a hero. Just seemed like the right thing to do, maybe. But the right thing changed everything for me, for you, for this whole damn town. Through the window, they could see the effects of that $8 decision rippling outward. The lot across the street, empty for years, now hosted a community garden that Mrs. Foster had organized. The teenagers who used to loiter with nowhere to go now, gathered at Washington Hardware after school, helping Marcus with small repairs in exchange for job skills and the kind of guidance that built character. Sarah Chen had been promoted to assistant manager at Murphy's Corner Store, partly because she'd learned to see people as more than their circumstances. Tom Bradley had instituted a policy of keeping coffee and sandwiches available for anyone who needed them. No questions asked. Even Dr. Patterson had started a small lending library of home repair books at his medical practice, inspired by Marcus's example of giving freely without expectation of return. As closing time approached, Marcus began his end-of-day routine, sweeping floors, counting the register, locking up inventory, simple tasks that felt like small miracles every single day. The door chimed one last time, and Linda Washington stepped inside. Marcus froze, dustpan halfway to the counter. His ex-wife looked older than he remembered, gray threading through her dark hair, but her eyes held the same warmth that had fallen in love with a young man's dreams 25 years ago. "Hello, Marcus." "Linda," his voice caught on her name. "What are you? How did you?" "I saw the video," she said quietly. Everyone saw the video. Tommy wanted to come see his father's store. Behind her, a 17-year-old young man stepped into view. Marcus's son had grown tall and lean, with his father's careful eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. He wore a Letterman jacket from his Ohio high school and looked around the store with curiosity rather than resentment. Dad Tommy's voice was uncertain, but not hostile. "Mom says you built this place back up from nothing." Marcus set down the dustpan and walked slowly toward his family, afraid that moving too fast might make them disappear like a mirage. "I had help, a lot of help." "The bikers," Tommy said, and there was something like admiration in his voice. 300 of them. Mom said they came because you stood up for someone. "They came because it was the right thing to do," Marcus corrected. "Same reason I helped their friend. Same reason anyone helps anyone." Linda reached out tentatively and touched the Hells Angels vest. Marcus wore her fingers, tracing the honorary brotherhood patch. "I never thought I'd see you in one of these." "I never thought I'd deserve one," Marcus replied. "Turns out family comes in all kinds of packages." They stood there for a long moment, three people who had once been everything to each other, trying to figure out how to navigate the space between past hurt and possible futures. "We came to see if Linda started, then stopped. Tommy's graduating in the spring. He wants to study business, maybe learn about running a store." Marcus felt his heart stop. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe Ohio isn't where we belong anymore," she said quietly. "Maybe home is wherever you are, as long as you're the man I fell in love with, the man who gives his last $8 to a stranger because it's the right thing to do." As the three of them stood in the golden light of a store rebuilt on kindness and brotherhood, Marcus understood that some stories don't have endings. They just have new beginnings. His had started with 8 crumpled dollars and a choice to stand up when it would have been easier to stay silent. The rest, as they say, was just details. Outside, the sun set over a town that had learned the difference between judging and justice, between fear and understanding. And in Washington Hardware, a family that had been broken by lies was being healed by truth, one conversation at a time. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. Sometimes standing up for a stranger means standing up for yourself. And sometimes $8 is all it takes to buy back everything you thought you'd lost forever. The bell above the door chimed softly as Marcus flipped the sign from open to closed. But the real store, the one built on respect and second chances, would stay open as long as good people were willing to stand up for each other. And in a world that often felt short on both kindness and courage, that was the most valuable inventory Marcus Washington had ever carried. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.